The boy didn't knock. He just pushed the door open, stepped inside, and stood there, small and still, like he had been walking for a very long time and had finally decided that this was far enough. Jade Monroe looked up from the counter. She had been in Seoul long enough to stop being surprised by most things. A teaching contract that evaporated 2 weeks after she landed. A city that didn't slow down for anyone's plans. A grandfather who wasn't hers but fed her every morning without being asked. Without making a ceremony of it, without needing anything back. But she had never seen anything quite like this. The boy was maybe 8 years old. School uniform, white shirt, dark pressed trousers, and a backpack whose straps he held in both hands like they were the only thing keeping him connected to the ground. His eyes moved slowly around the small restaurant with the quiet seriousness of someone conducting an inspection. Not scared, not lost, just watching, taking inventory, deciding. Jade set down her cloth. "Hey," he looked at her. "You hungry?" A pause long enough that she thought he might not answer. Then one careful nod. She pulled out the counter stool and tilted her head toward it. He crossed the room without hesitation, set his backpack beside him with a neatness that felt practiced, and sat with both hands folded on the counter like he was here for a meeting. Jade almost smiled. She filled a glass of water, set it in front of him. He said, quietly, in Korean, "Thank you." She answered in Korean. His eyebrows lifted just slightly. She got that look sometimes, the one that said, "You're not what I expected." And had learned to take it as a compliment. She ladled a bowl of juk from the pot. Soft, warm, fragrant, her daily special, a recipe that lived somewhere between her grandmother's kitchen in New Orleans and the cramped stove of this small restaurant in Mapogu. She set it down with a plate of banchan on the side and went back to wiping the counter like he had been coming here for years. No fuss, no interrogation, just food. He looked at the bowl, then at her, then he picked up his spoon and ate. In the corner, old Harabeoji, 74 years old, owner of this place, grandfather of Jade's closest friend Mia, and the closest thing to family she had on this side of the world, stirred from his afternoon nap. He opened one eye, spotted the boy, shuffled over and placed a small plate of sweet rice cakes beside the banchan, without a word, then shuffled back to his chair and closed his eye again. The boy watched Harabeoji's back. Something in his posture changed. His shoulders dropped a fraction. His grip on the spoon loosened. Whatever weight 8 years old was not supposed to carry eased, just slightly, in this small warm room that smelled like doenjang and rain and something faintly sweet from the pot on the stove. This place was safe. He didn't know how he knew. He just knew. They existed together in easy quiet. The rain on the windows, Harabeoji's soft breathing from the corner, the low simmer of something on the stove. Jade found herself teaching him English words without really planning to. She held up the wooden spoon and said, "Simmer." Explained it meant cooking something slowly, low heat, so the flavor had time to build properly. He repeated it carefully. Simmer. Exactly. The corner of his mouth moved, not quite a smile, but close enough that Jade filed it away like something valuable. She noticed his uniform crest, small, embroidered, expensive in the quiet way. His shoes polished to a mirror finish. The watch on his small wrist, understated but serious. This child was not from this neighborhood. She said nothing about any of it, just refilled his water. He had eaten most of the jerk and was attempting to explain something about his school in careful halting English, Jade listening with her full attention, nodding, correcting gently, when his eyes drifted to the window and stayed there. She followed his gaze. 3 black cars had stopped outside, expensive, identical, the kind that didn't belong on this street. Min Jun's sentence stopped mid-word. His hands found his backpack straps again, holding them tight, and something behind his eyes went very quiet in the way things go quiet right before something happens. Like he had known this moment was coming, like he had hoped it wouldn't. The restaurant door opened. and Jade Monroe's entire understanding of the afternoon changed forever. If you're already feeling this story, hit that subscribe button right now, because we are just getting started. The man who stepped through the door was not loud. He didn't need to be. Tall, broad-shouldered, dark coat that probably cost more than 3 months of Jade's rent. His face was angular and absolutely still. The kind of still that doesn't come from peace, but from years of deciding that showing nothing was safer than showing anything. His eyes moved across the room the way a camera sweeps a space. Quick, precise, missing nothing. 3 men came in behind him without being told, positioned themselves at the door, the window, the back wall. Practiced. Automatic. Like breathing. The temperature in the room dropped. Mr. Choi, who had sat at that window table every single day for 11 years, who had survived 2 knee replacements and 1 very bad marriage and never once left his soup unfinished, folded his newspaper, set it down on the table, and went very still. Harabeoji opened both eyes. Jade didn't move. She stood behind the counter with her hand still resting on the pot and watched this man fill the doorway of her small, worn lunch spot like he had stepped in from a completely different world. Because he had. His eyes swept the room once, twice. And then they found Min June at the counter. For 1 single second, 1 fraction of a moment that Jade almost missed, something moved across his face that had nothing to do with power or control or whatever it was that made an entire restaurant hold its breath when he walked in. Relief. Gone as fast as it came. He crossed the room, every step deliberate, crouched to Min June's level, and his voice when he spoke was low and quiet and meant for no one else. His hands moved briefly, checking, assessing. Min June answered in short sentences, nodded twice. Then Min June turned and pointed directly at Jade. The man straightened, turned, and looked at her. Jade looked right back. She had no idea who this man was. She had no context for the cars outside or the men at her walls, or the way old Mr. Choi was currently trying to become part of the furniture. All she had was instinct. And every instinct she had was firing at once. She held his gaze anyway. He reached into his coat, placed an envelope on the counter between them. It made no sound, but it landed with weight. Jade didn't touch it. For a moment, neither of them moved. The restaurant was so quiet she could hear the rain. Then he took Min June's hand, turned, and walked out. No explanation, no introduction. No acknowledgement that she was a person who deserved either. Just the envelope on the counter and the door closing, and the 3 black cars pulling away like they had never been there at all. The silence that followed was enormous. Mr. Choi picked up his newspaper with hands that were not entirely steady. Harabeoji had not moved from his chair, but his eyes were fixed on Jade with an expression she had never seen on his face before. Something careful. Something that looked almost like concern. Jade stared at the envelope, then at the door, then at Harabeoji. He let the silence breathe for a long moment the way he always did. Like silence was a language he was fluent in, and rushing it was rude. Then quietly, that was Kwon Seo-jin. The name meant nothing to her. She said so. Harabeoji looked at her steadily. Everyone in Seoul knows that name, Jade. Something in the way he said it, not dramatic, not exaggerated, just plain and factual like he was telling her the weather, made the alarm in her chest ring louder. She picked up the envelope, opened it. The amount inside made her set it back down, pick it back up, set it down again. Who is he? She asked. Harabeoji was quiet for a moment, then, the kind of man, he said slowly, whose son you do not want to be the last person who saw. That night, Jade sat at her small table with her laptop open and the envelope beside her and the rain still going outside. She typed the name, Kwon Seo-jin. The results loaded. She read them, closed the laptop, sat in the dark for a while, then opened it again. The Kwon Syndicate. 3 generations. Old money braided so tightly with old crime that nobody had ever managed to separate them. The kind of organization that didn't make headlines because it controlled who wrote them. Kwon Seo-jin had taken over at 32 and in 7 years consolidated more power than his father had in 20, feared, untouchable, patient in a way that was more dangerous than rage, widower, 1 son. She closed the laptop, thought about Min-jun's hands on his backpack straps, the way he had held them like an anchor, the way his shoulders had dropped in this small, warm restaurant like he had been waiting a long time to put something down. The almost smile. Simmer, he had said. Careful and precise. She sat in the dark for a long time. 3 days passed. Life at Parks continued the way it always did. Mr. Choi at his window table, Harabeoji at his stove. The smell of doenjang and whatever Jade was making for the daily special. Everything looked the same, but Jade kept glancing at the counter stool. The one Min-jun had sat on, the small scuff on the footrest from his polished shoes. She caught herself looking at it between orders, during prep, once in the middle of a conversation with a regular who had to repeat himself twice before she heard him. She called Mia on the second night. Mia was in Chicago for work and answered on the second ring, already talking before the call connected. Hold on, hold on. A door closing, then, okay, what's wrong? Nothing's wrong. Why does something have to be wrong? Because you have a voice for when everything is fine, and a voice for when you're about to tell me something I don't want to hear. That was the second voice. Jade looked at the envelope on her kitchen table. She had not moved it, not spent it, not returned it, not thrown it away. It just sat there like a question she wasn't ready to answer. A boy came into the restaurant 3 days ago, she said. Maybe 8 years old. Alone. I fed him. Okay. His father came to get him. A pause. Okay. Mia. Jade kept her voice even. His father is Kwon Seo-jin. The pause this time was different, longer. The kind of silence that had texture and weight. Jade. I know. You fed Kwon Seo-jin's son. I didn't know who he was. He was just a wet little boy who walked through my door and looked like he hadn't exhaled in months. How much was in the envelope? Jade told her. Mia made a sound that was not quite a word. I didn't take it, Jade said. It's still on my table. Good. Don't touch it. Don't call anyone. Just leave it alone and let it be a strange Tuesday that you never think about again. Jade said nothing. Jade, I'm not doing anything. You have the voice again. Mia, I'm just sitting in my apartment. Promise me you'll leave it alone. She promised. She was not entirely sure she meant it. The third day was a Thursday. Jade was doing closing prep when the door opened. She held up one hand without looking. We're closed. And kept wiping. Ms. Monroe. The voice was calm, measured, the kind of voice that had never once raised itself because it had never needed to. She looked up. The man standing inside the door was not Kwon Seo-jin. He was smaller, older, immaculate in a grey suit with not one wrinkle in it, and an expression of such perfect pleasantness that it made the back of her neck prickle. He had the look of a man who was always the most reasonable person in the room right up until he wasn't. My name is Mr. O, he said. I work for Mr. Kwon. Jade set down her cloth. We're closed. I won't take much of your time. He crossed to the counter and placed a folder on it. Thick, cream-coloured, no label. Mr. Kwon would like to make you an offer. Jade looked at the folder, did not touch it. Min-jun, Mr. O continued, has not stopped talking about you since Thursday. This is notable because Min-jun, as a rule, does not talk very much at all. A brief pause. Mr. Kwon is proposing a formal arrangement. You would relocate to the Kwon estate, companion and tutor to Min-jun, his English, his daily routine, his general education. Full room and board. A generous monthly salary. Another pause. And protection. For you and for the people you care about. The last part landed differently from the rest. Not a threat. Just a fact, stated plainly, the way you might mention weather. I'm not a nanny. Jade said. The corner of Mr. O's mouth moved. Mr. Kwon is aware. He's not looking for a nanny. A beat. He's looking for whatever it is you are. I'll think about it, Jade said. Mr. O nodded once, left the folder, walked out. She sat with Harabeoji that evening, the two of them at the small back table after closing, tea and the comfortable silence that had taken months to build. The folder sat on the counter where Mr. O had left it. Harabeoji looked at it once, then at Jade, then back at his tea. You already know what's in it, he said. I know what he told me. Then you already know what you're going to do. It's dangerous, Harabeoji. Yes. That world is dangerous. Yes. He set down his cup. Jade, she looked at him. That boy came in here, he said slowly, out of all of Seoul. All the streets, all the doors he could have pushed open. He paused. He pushed this one. He sat at that stool. He ate your food. Another pause. And he talked. He barely said anything. For Min-jun, Harabeoji said quietly, barely anything is everything. Jade looked at the counter stool across the room, the small scuff on the footrest. Children, Harabeoji said, picking up his tea, know things that adults spend years forgetting how to feel. The restaurant was quiet around them. Rain outside again. Seoul in this season was nothing but rain and grey skies and the kind of cold that settled into your bones and stayed. Jade thought about Min-jun's eyes, the almost smile. Simmer. She got up, crossed to the counter, picked up the folder, opened it, read it, closed it. She called Mia from her apartment at 11 that night. Mia answered immediately. Didn't say hello, just, Jade, what did you do? I haven't done anything yet. Yet. I'm thinking about taking the offer. Jade. Mia, you should have seen him. Her voice came out quieter than she intended. He sat at that counter like he was so tired, like he'd been carrying something for so long he'd forgotten what it felt like not to. He's 8 years old. Mia was silent for a long time. I know what that family has been through, what that little boy has been through. A breath. That's exactly why I'm scared for you. I know it's not simple. Do you? I'm from New Orleans, Mia. I know complicated. A beat. Then despite everything. A small exhale that was almost a laugh. Just be careful. Call me every day. Every day. And Jade? Yeah. Don't let them change who you are. Jade looked at her reflection in the dark window, the rain on the glass making her face look like something dissolving and reforming at the same time. They won't, she said. She almost believed it. The next morning she packed one bag. Practical and clothes, her grandmother's recipe notebook, her New Orleans Saints mug that she refused to leave behind under any circumstances. Harabeoji was already in the kitchen. He packed her a container of doenjang jjigae for the road without being asked, wrapped it carefully, handed it to her without ceremony. She hugged him, held on a beat longer than usual. He patted her back twice, steady, solid. Sunday lunch? You come back? Every Sunday, she said. The black car was waiting outside. 2 men she didn't know, courteous and silent, who held the door and said nothing. As the car pulled away from Mapogu, Jade turned and watched Park's restaurant get smaller through the rear window, the worn sign, the steamed glass, the street she had learned by feel over 2 years of wrong turns and small discoveries. Then she faced forward. She had absolutely no idea what she was walking into, but somewhere underneath all the fear and the uncertainty and the very reasonable voice in her head that sounded exactly like Mia saying, "Please don't do this." She felt something that was dangerously close to where she was supposed to be. The Kwon estate did not look like danger. That was the first thing she noticed. She had braced herself for something dark and fortress-like. High walls, iron gates, the architecture of a man who had enemies. And yes, there were guards, more than she could count in one sweep, moving through the grounds with a casualness that was not casual at all. Yes, the perimeter wall was high and the cameras were everywhere, but the estate itself was beautiful. Han River on one side, grey and wide and moving slowly in the morning light, glass and clean lines and a garden that someone had tended with genuine care. Not the manicured perfectionism of a showpiece, but something more personal, like whoever designed it had wanted it to feel like a living thing. Jade sat in the back of the car and looked at all of it and thought about the boy who had grown up here, about what it meant to grow up somewhere beautiful and suffocating at the same time. Mrs. Yoon met her at the door, perhaps 60, impeccably dressed, with the posture of someone who ironed their own spine every morning. She walked Jade through the estate in measured steps and clipped precise Korean that left no room for questions. The rules: no West Wing under any circumstances, no wandering the grounds at night, security escort required outdoors, her access limited to the kitchen, Min Jun's wing, the informal dining area, and her own room. "And Mr. Kwon?" Jade asked. Mrs. Yoon looked at her. "Mr. Kwon will make himself available when he chooses to." Which told her everything and nothing. Her room was large and immaculate with a window that looked out over the river. She put her grandmother's recipe notebook on the desk, put her New Orleans Saints mug on the nightstand, purple and gold against all this white and grey. Small flag planted. She sat on the edge of the bed and breathed. "Okay, Jade. Okay." She had been in her room exactly 11 minutes when she heard it. Not a knock. More like presence. The particular quality of silence that meant someone was standing just on the other side of the door deciding something. She opened it. Min Jun was standing in the hallway. Backpack on. She would learn that the backpack was a constant. Something he wore around the estate the way other children carried comfort objects. His hands were at his sides, and his expression was serious, and he had clearly prepared for this moment. "Are you ready to start?" In English. Careful. Rehearsed to within an inch of its life. "Did you practice that?" The smallest pause. "Yes," she laughed. Not a polite laugh, not a restrained, appropriate laugh. A real one. Big and sudden and completely unguarded, the kind that her mother always said could wake the dead. It filled the hallway and bounced off the clean white walls and was probably audible from the floor below. Min Jun startled. His eyes went wide. And then, slowly, like sunrise happening in real time, the corner of his mouth curved upward. Not a full smile, but real. Genuinely, completely real. Jade felt something settle in her chest, like a key turning in a lock she hadn't known was there. "Come on then," she said. "Let's go find the kitchen." The kitchen became their world. It happened gradually and then all at once, the way most important things do. The first day they made juk together, Min Jun on a step stool to reach the counter, watching Jade's hands with the focused attention of a student who took every subject seriously. The second day he asked if they could make something different. The third day he arrived at the kitchen door before she did, had already arranged the ingredients he wanted in a line on the counter, and was waiting. She taught him English through food: season, fold, rest, bloom. He repeated each word with the same care he had given simmer, filing them somewhere important, bringing them out later in unexpected contexts that made her laugh every single time. He drew pictures and left them outside her door every morning. Detailed, serious, the kitchen, the garden, the river, the two of them at the stove. She pinned them to the wall above her desk until the white wall was covered and the room felt like hers. He started talking more, not just to her. She heard him one morning speaking to one of the younger kitchen staff, a full 3 sentences unprompted, and watched the staff member's face register quiet astonishment before composing itself. One afternoon in the garden, under the patient watch of their security escort, Min Jun asked why she had come to Korea. She told him the truth, the teaching job, the plan falling apart, staying anyway because going home felt like admitting something she wasn't ready to admit. He thought about this with great seriousness. "Are you sad it didn't work?" "Sometimes," she said honestly. He was quiet for a moment. Then, "I'm glad it didn't work." She looked at him. Because then you wouldn't be here, he said simply, and went back to looking at the river like he hadn't just broken her heart wide open and put it back together in the same sentence. Like this video if Minjun just got you. Keep watching. This is where the father comes in. Seo Jin was a presence more than a person for the first 2 weeks. He was there. In the estate, in the rooms, in the brief formal appearances at the dinner table where he sat across from Minjun, and they ate in a silence so heavy with everything unsaid that Jade had to concentrate on her food to keep from saying something into it. He always left first. He acknowledged Jade with a nod, precise, polite, completely impenetrable, like she was furniture, useful, placed correctly, fulfilling its function. She told herself that was fine. She was not there for him. But one evening, just after 7, when Minjun was in his room and the kitchen was quiet, Jade was working through her grandmother's notebook trying to figure out how to make a proper roux with what was available to her in Seoul. Heat low, constant stirring. She was talking to herself the way she always did when she cooked alone. Low and slow, she murmured. You cannot rush it. The whole thing burns if you rush it. She felt the quality of the silence in the doorway change. She looked up. Seo Jin was standing at the kitchen entrance, jacket gone, sleeves pushed up, and an expression she had not seen on his face before. Not the stone composure of the restaurant, not the formal blankness of the dinner table. Something quieter, something that looked almost like a man standing outside a lit window on a cold night, looking in at something he had forgotten he was allowed to want. Their eyes met. Jade held his gaze, steady. Something moved across his face, brief, contained, gone before she could fully read it. He turned and walked away. His footsteps faded down the corridor. Jade looked back at the pot, kept stirring. But her hands were not entirely steady, and the kitchen felt 3 degrees warmer than it had 60 seconds ago, and she was very deliberately not thinking about the way he had stood in that doorway like a man who had forgotten he was allowed to stand still somewhere without a reason. He appeared in the kitchen doorway twice more that week, never came in, never announced himself, just stopped, watched, left. The second time Jade was teaching Minjun how to separate eggs, a skill Minjun approached with the focused intensity of someone defusing something. And she felt Seo Jin's presence in the doorway, the way you feel a change in weather before it arrives. She didn't look up. Gently, she told Minjun, you're not fighting it, you're convincing it. Minjun adjusted his grip on the egg with great seriousness. From the doorway, nothing, just presence. Then, absence. Minjun glanced at the empty doorway and then at Jade with an expression that was far too knowing for 8 years old. What? Jade said. He looked back at his egg. Nothing. The third time Seo Jin appeared in the doorway, Jade was alone, on the phone with Mia, leaning against the counter, laughing at something, completely unguarded. She turned and saw him and the laugh didn't stop immediately. It tapered naturally the way a song ends rather than the way a record scratches. He looked at her, at the pot on the stove. What is that? Doenjang jjigae, Harabeoji's recipe. A beet. You want some? The question surprised him. She could see it. A fractional widening of the eyes, quickly managed, like it had slipped through a gap in his composure before he could close it. No, he said. He left. Jade put the phone back to her ear. Mia's voice. Was that... Don't, Jade said. Don't say anything. A beat. Jade, Mia, I'm serious. Mia said nothing, but she was smiling. Jade could hear it. The nightmare happened on a Wednesday night. Jade had been asleep for maybe 2 hours when something pulled her out. Not a sound exactly, more like the absence of one. The particular quality of silence that meant something in the house had changed. She sat up. Listened. Then got up, pulled on a sweater, opened her door. Minjun was sitting against the wall directly across from her room, knees pulled to his chest, backpack beside him. His eyes were open and dry, but his face had that particular blankness she recognized immediately because she had worn it herself at certain points in her life. The face of someone who has woken from something terrible and is waiting for their heartbeat to slow down enough to trust that they are safe. He was not crying. That somehow made it worse. Jade didn't ask what he dreamed, didn't ask if he was okay. She sat down beside him on the floor, back against the wall, shoulder close to his, knees up the same way his were. She looked at the wall across the corridor and let the silence be what it was. Then she started to hum, low and soft, her grandmother's song, the one with no name, the one that existed only in the key of a New Orleans kitchen at 2 in the morning. Something about the sound of it in this cold Korean corridor felt like a small, deliberate act of warmth against everything this house had forgotten how to be. She felt Minjun shift. Slowly, carefully, the way you test ice before you trust your weight to it. He leaned against her arm. She didn't move, didn't make a thing of it, just kept humming. He leaned a little more. She stayed exactly where she was. Seo-jin found them like that. His housekeeper had come to his room with a quiet knock, the way she was trained to when Min-jun had nights like this. He had come down the corridor expecting what he always found, his son alone against the wall, and the two of them sitting in a silence that neither of them knew how to fill. Instead, he stopped at the end of the corridor and saw this. Min-jun's head tipped against Jade's arm, her humming moving softly through the dim hallway, his son's hands loose in his lap, not gripping, not bracing, just resting. Seo-jin stood there for a long time, just for that moment, standing in the corridor of his own estate at 2 in the morning, watching his son breathe against the arm of a woman from New Orleans who had sat down on the floor without being asked and started singing without being told. Kwon Seo-jin's face was not composed at all. Not frightening, not powerful, just a father. A tired, grieving father watching someone give his son something he had not known how to give him, and feeling the specific quiet pain of that, not resentment, something more honest, something that lived in the space between gratitude and grief and had no clean name. He turned quietly and went back to his room. He did not sleep for a long time after that. The next morning, Jade was making coffee when she felt the shift in the air that meant he was there. She reached for a second mug without turning around. He sat at the kitchen island, said nothing. She set the coffee in front of him, leaned against the counter with her own mug, looked out at the river, grey morning, mist low on the water, Seoul waking slowly on the other side. The silence between them was different from all the silences before it, less armoured, like something had been set down overnight and neither of them had picked it back up yet. What did you sing to him? Not his formal voice, something underneath that, something that had been up since 2 in the morning. She told him, the song, her grandmother, the kitchen in New Orleans, the way certain sounds felt like home even when you were 8,000 miles away from it. He listened with his whole body, completely still, completely present. No part of him managing the conversation from a distance. His mother, he said eventually, to his coffee cup, not to her. Used to make him warm juck when he couldn't sleep. The weight of that sentence sat between them like something physical. Jade felt it land and didn't try to soften it or fill the space around it with words. I didn't know, she said quietly. I know you didn't. He stood, picked up his cup, paused. He drew you, he said, still to the middle distance. The family portrait his school asked them to make, 3 figures at a table. A beat. You were standing next to him. He put his cup in the sink and walked out. Jade stood in the kitchen with both hands around her mug and the river moving grey and slow outside the window and the feeling of 3 figures at a table sitting in her chest like something she didn't have a word for yet. A tall man, a small boy, a woman with big hair, already inside the portrait before she had ever said yes. She noticed the change in the estate on a Monday, subtle at first, the way important things always are before they aren't. More guards on the perimeter, conversations that stopped a beat too quickly when she entered rooms. Mr. O moving through the halls with a new urgency, his pleasant expression exactly the same as always, which somehow made it worse. Seojin disappeared for a day and a half. Jade kept Minjun's world warm and normal. Cooking, English lessons, the garden in the afternoon under security escort, Minjun chattering about a book he was reading, Jade half listening and half watching the guards, and trying to name the specific quality of tension that had settled over the estate like weather coming in from the river. She watched Mr. O. She couldn't have explained exactly why. Something about him had always sat at the edge of her instincts like a splinter she couldn't quite locate. That perfect pleasantness, that immaculate composure, the way he was always precisely where he needed to be without ever appearing to have moved there deliberately. But it was more than that now. It was the way he looked at her. Not obviously, not in a way she could point to. But she caught it sometimes in passing. A glance that lasted a fraction too long, an assessment that had nothing to do with whether she was doing her job properly. Like a man who was watching something he hadn't yet decided what to do with. She said nothing, filed it away, kept watching. It was a Thursday afternoon when she took the wrong turn. She had been looking for Minjun. He had slipped away from their lesson 20 minutes early, which was unlike him. And she had checked the kitchen, the garden, his room, and was moving through the east corridor when she heard the voices. Low, tense, behind the closed door of Seojin's private study. She should have kept walking. Every reasonable instinct told her to keep her eyes forward and her feet moving. But she heard the word, woman. Said in a tone that stopped her feet before her brain caught up with the decision. She stood in the corridor and listened. Seojin's voice, controlled but with something underneath it she had never heard there before. Barely managed fury. Mr. O's voice, calm, measured, that same perfect pleasantness she realized in this moment was not pleasantness at all, but the most disciplined kind of coldness. Fragments through the door. The Bayek organization is moving faster than anticipated. Yeonji's accident. It was not an accident. Seojin. Flat. Absolute. No. Mr. O. It was not. Someone gave them her schedule. Someone in this house knew exactly where she would be and when. Jade stopped breathing. We are close to knowing who. How close? Close enough that certain people may become nervous, may feel the need to act before we get there. Then we move first. There is the matter of the woman. Silence. She heard something she should not have heard. I am not yet certain how much. Jade's blood went cold. She backed away. 1 step, 2, 3, slow and careful, heel to toe, every footfall deliberate. Her sleeve caught the decorative vase on the hallway shelf. It wobbled. Time slowed down the way it does in moments that matter. She watched it tip, reached for it, caught it with both hands a half second before it hit the floor. The sound it made against her palms was not loud. But in that corridor, in that silence, it was enough. The voices inside stopped. Complete silence. Footsteps crossing to the door. The door opened. Seojin stepped out and found her in the corridor, vase in both hands, unable to move, looking at him with an expression she had absolutely no control over. Ms. Monroe. I was looking for Minjun. Her voice came out steady. She had no idea how. Minjun is in the library. A pause that had no bottom. Everything she had heard, everything he knew she had heard, everything neither of them was going to say right now with Mr. O standing just inside the door and the entire weight of this house pressing down on both of them. Go find him. She held his gaze for 1 second. 2. And Ms. Monroe. His eyes dropped to the vase in her hands. Put that down before you break it. She set it back on the shelf, turned, walked down the corridor, steady steps. She did not run. Around the corner, out of sight, she pressed her back against the wall and closed her eyes and exhaled like she had been underwater for 3 minutes and had just broken the surface. Her hands were shaking. She looked at them, made them stop. Then she went to find Min-jun. That night she could not sleep. She lay in the dark and ran through what she knew. Yeonji had been murdered. Someone inside this estate had helped. That someone was still here, still walking these halls, still moving through this house like they belonged in it. She thought about Min-jun asleep down the hall, his drawings on her wall, the way he said simmer like it was a word worth keeping forever. She was not going anywhere. The strange things started 2 days later. Her bedroom door left open when she had closed it. Her phone moved, not obviously, just enough that she knew. A window latch she always checked found unlocked in the morning. Messages without words. She said nothing to anyone. Kept paying attention with a different quality of attention now. Sharper, quieter. The kind her grandmother would have called keeping your eyes in the back of your head, baby. She watched Mr. O with new eyes. The picture assembled itself slowly, and then all at once. The way he positioned himself in rooms. The calls he took facing walls. The particular path he walked through the estate. Not the most efficient path, but the one that took him past every camera. Like a man who knew where every camera was because he had helped place them. Like a man who had been feeding information about this house for a very long time. Then one morning she reached for her New Orleans Saints mug and found a folded note inside it. She stood very still, unfolded it. Some things are better forgotten. You seem smart enough to know that. She read it twice, set it on the nightstand. She was scared. Genuinely, completely scared in a way she had been managing and containing for days, and that this small folded note had just made impossible to contain anymore. She was also. And this was the New Orleans in her, the part raised on stories of women who had faced worse and set their jaw and kept moving. Deeply, quietly furious. Nobody put notes in her mug. She picked it up, got dressed, walked to Seojin's study, knocked once, opened the door before he answered. He was at his desk, looked up. Whatever he had been about to say died when he saw her face. She crossed the room, placed the note on his desk, said nothing. He read it, and she watched his stillness become a completely different kind of stillness. Not composure, but something beneath it, something with heat in it, something moving through him like a current with nowhere to go. He looked up at her. "You came to me. Someone in your house put that in my mug." Her voice was even. "The mug on my nightstand, in my room." A beat. Where else would I go? He held her gaze for a long moment. "Sit down, Ms. Monroe." She sat. And for the first time since she had arrived at this estate, Kwon Seo-jin talked to her. Really talked. Told her about Mr. O. The suspicion building slowly, piece by piece. Her note the final piece that completed the picture. That he knew what had to be done. Then, "You were never in as much danger as you could have been." She waited. "Because I was watching." A pause. "I have been watching since the restaurant." "Since the restaurant," she repeated. "Since Min-jun pointed at you." His voice was even, factual. But it cost him something. She could see it in the slight tension along his jaw, in the way his eyes stayed on hers like he had decided to say this and was going to finish it. "I needed to know who you were, what you wanted, whether you were—" He stopped. "Safe," Jade said quietly. "Yes." "And?" A beat. Something shifted in his expression. Not quite a smile, not quite softness, but the place where both of those things lived before they were allowed to exist. "You sat on the floor of my corridor at 2 a.m, he said, "and sang my son to sleep." He looked at his desk, then back at her. "I know who you are, Ms. Monroe." The silence after that was entirely different from every silence that had come before it. Mr. O was gone from the estate by nightfall. Jade didn't ask how. Seo-jin didn't offer details. Some things in this world happen the way weather happened. You didn't need to understand the mechanics to know the storm had passed. The estate exhaled. The guards relaxed fractionally. Mrs. Yoon passed Jade in the corridor that evening and looked at her. Not warmly, not with approval exactly, but with something she had never directed at her before. Acknowledgement. The particular look of a woman who has reassessed something and is not yet ready to say so out loud. Jade took it. That evening, all three of them sat at the dinner table together, and it was different from every dinner before it. Seojin didn't leave early. He sat across from Minjun, and he stayed, and he was present in a way that was different from his usual presence. Less armoured, less managed. Like he had set something down that afternoon in the study and hadn't picked it back up. Minjun talked almost the entire meal. He had opinions about his book, questions about New Orleans, a detailed theory about why the roux Jade had made that afternoon was better than the version from 2 weeks ago that he delivered with the confidence of a professional food critic. At one point, in the middle of a sentence about something else entirely, he said, "Simmer." Just that. No context, like it had floated to the surface of his mind, and he had let it out. Jade looked at him. Then she laughed. That big, unguarded Harabeoji loud laugh that bounced off the walls and filled the room and had absolutely no business being in a dining room this elegant. Seojin looked at her, and for the first time, barely briefly, like the sun coming out for just a moment between clouds, something that was almost a smile crossed his face. Jade looked away, her heart doing something she didn't have a word for yet. Minjun looked between them both with those two old, too knowing eyes, said nothing, but his mouth curved and he went back to his food like he had just confirmed something he had already suspected. He saw everything. He always had. After Minjun was in bed, the house went quiet. Jade was in the kitchen, not cooking, just there, the way she sometimes was at night when she needed to think, and thinking was easier somewhere that smelled like something real. She heard him before she saw him. That shift in the air, that frequency adjustment. She reached for a second mug without thinking. He sat at the kitchen island, the Han River dark and glittering beyond the glass. Seoul breathing on the other side of it. She set the tea in front of him and leaned against the counter with her own, and for a while neither of them said anything, and it was the most comfortable silence she had ever shared with another person in her life. He asked about New Orleans, and she talked, really talked, the way she hadn't with anyone in this city in a long time. Her grandmother's kitchen, the smell of the city in summer, heavy and sweet and alive in a way that got into your lungs and stayed. The food that was more than food, that was history and memory and love and grief all cooked down together into something you could eat. Why she had left. Why she hadn't gone back. Why Seoul had felt like the right-wrong decision and kept feeling that way even on the hard days. He listened, all the way through, not waiting for his turn to speak, actually listening with his whole body, the way she had noticed he did with Minjun. Like what she was saying mattered. She asked about Yeonji. She hadn't planned to. It just came out. The way things come out when the walls are low and the hour is late, and you are sitting across from someone who has stopped pretending. He was quiet for a long moment. Then he told her. Not everything. She didn't expect everything, but small things. The way Yeonji laughed. The way Minjun had her eyes and her stubbornness, and the particular way she tilted her head when she was thinking hard about something. The way this house had felt like a held breath for 18 months, and he had not known how to exhale it for his son. He smiles more now, Seojin said quietly, to the counter, not quite to her. Minjun? He has a good smile, Jade said. Yes. A pause. He does. The kitchen was very quiet around them. The river moved outside. The city hummed on the other side of it. His phone rang. He looked at the screen. Something moved across his face. Back to business, back to the world outside these walls, back to the war that had been circling this estate and was now circling closer. He stood, picked up the call, moved toward the door, stopped in the doorway, looked back at her. Stay inside tonight. She nodded. He held her gaze for one long moment. One moment that contained everything neither of them had said and everything both of them knew, and the particular specific weight of two people standing at the edge of something and deciding, not tonight, not yet, but acknowledging that the edge was there. Then he was gone. Jade sat alone at the kitchen island for a long time after that. 2 empty mugs, the river dark and glittering beyond the glass. She thought about Minjun's drawing, 3 figures at a table, the woman with big hair already inside the portrait before she had ever agreed to come. She thought about Harabeoji's voice. Children know things adults spend years forgetting how to feel. She thought about Mia saying don't let them change who you are, and the truth that sat underneath that the real risk was never that they would change her. The real risk was that she would look up one day and realize she had stopped wanting to leave. She thought about Seojin's hand resting near hers on the counter earlier. Not touching, just near, both of them aware of it, neither of them moving. Not yet. Outside the estate walls, Seoul hummed and the Bayek organization circled, and the real danger hadn't finished arriving yet. There were things still coming that she couldn't see from here, battles that hadn't started, truths that hadn't surfaced, mornings that hadn't happened yet. But she was here. She had sat on the floor of a corridor at 2 in the morning and hummed her grandmother's song into the dark. She had put her saint's mug on a nightstand in a fortress and called it hers. She had fed a lonely boy Duke and taught him a word that turned out to be about more than cooking. She wrapped both hands around her mug. Outside the window, the river kept moving, grey and steady and unbothered by anything that happened on its banks. Mama always said the best things simmer, she thought. Low heat, no rushing. I used to think she was talking about food. She smiled, set down her mug, and stayed. If this story moved you, and I think it did, subscribe and turn on notifications because the story of Jade and Seojin is far from over. Drop a comment below and tell me, what was the moment that got you? Was it Minjun and the portrait, the corridor, or that almost smile at dinner? I read every single one. See you in the next story.